into order. Approval of the agenda.
Staff recommends approval of the agenda, subject to removing agenda item number 6. It's not ready. There were no plans that were resubmitted for that item.
Move to approve the amended agenda.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Approval of the minutes for the March 16th, 2023 meeting. Are there any changes or updates? Okay.
Move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Item number 4, discussion and public hearing on a site plan for building elevation associated with the gym platform addition. I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, David. Okay, item number 3, approval of the FY 2024 through 2029 capital investment plan, CIP. David Smokes, the town administrator, is going to present that.
I know it's boring.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. You're welcome to skip me if you'd like. We can move past this really quickly and get to some more important business.
Let's do the Cliff Notes version.
I will do my best. Thank you very much, David Smoke, Town Administrator. And this is my annual presentation to the Planning Commission. And your duties and responsibilities, as state law says, is to review the CIP and make a recommendation to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. So that's why we're here tonight. Let's see if this clicker works, and we'll get going. So what is the CIP? It's a 6-year plan of all of our think of large capital projects, anything over $25,000, contracts, purchases, things that we're going to put public infrastructure in the ground. Those are the types of things that go into our planning for our CIP. And why do we do our CIP? Well, it helps us really track from year to year what our expenses and our revenues are going to be in the long term. It helps us look at priorities. The Board of Mayor and Aldermen and the Planning Commission review these projects each and every year to see what the top priorities are for our town and our community. And then, of course, the board has to figure out ways to budget for those priorities. Also, through the strategic planning process, we usually come up with a lot of different ideas, a lot of different projects with infrastructure for traffic, for parks, and for our general government projects. So those are all the things that we do each and every year with our CIP. So first, greenways and general projects. I'm going to talk to you about all the projects going on in 2024, which is next year's fiscal year, which starts on July 1st. We have a 6-year CIP. If there's other projects that are on your list in front of you that you'd like to ask about, we're welcome to get into those. But I wanted to just focus really on 2024 because that's the year we actually budget for in this fiscal year. The biggest change from what I sent to you prior to tonight for this evening is the very first project we're going to talk about, and that is a parkland purchase. We have been talking to a property owner in the southwest part of town about purchasing a future park. This would be an opportunity to really have the largest park that we would have in our entire system if we could acquire this. So this is putting money in place to make that purchase happen sometime in the next fiscal year.
How many acres is that again?
We don't have a direct number yet, but it would be at least 50.
Okay.
Next project is Sonia Drive Sidewalk, and now this could probably be called Sonia Drive and Admiral Road Sidewalk. This has taken a little bit more planning and engineering for this, but this is all in the parent responsibility zone, trying to add sidewalk there so it's a much safer walk for students and pedestrians of all ages to be able to use. But it's right next to Farragut High School, Farragut Middle and Intermediate School. And so this is a project that we're looking at doing right-of-way in 2024 and then construction in FY 2025. Next up is the Red Mill Dam Trailhead. We were graciously donated this property by a gentleman who recently passed away. And so this is the year that we're going to be putting money into the budget to do some parking lot, basically have a minimal parking lot there as a trailhead, and then construct a trail down to the Red Mill Dam, which is really a treat, and hopefully everybody will be able to see that soon. Bud and his crews have been working hard and clearing a lot of the land that's really scrub and brush, things like that. But we will have a great little access point down there once we're done. Also, we've got Anchor Park pedestrian crossing improvements. There are 3 different access points across Turkey Creek Road into Anchor Park. And if you think about the access ways at Grigsby Chapel and at Watt Road where the signalized crosswalks are. This would be similar in scope to what you see out there. Also included in next fiscal year are school zone signal improvements. And these are going to be, we have current school zone signals out there. Sometimes they can be hard to see when the foliage has grown up around some of those areas. So we're looking at putting mast arms over a couple spots on Campbell Station Road so that you do have better visibility of the school zones. Again, that's a plan for next fiscal year. Maintenance project for us is another roof for our public works storage shed. It's been on there about 30 plus years and it's met its useful life, so we need to replace that. And then we get into Parks and Recreation. We've already purchased a prefabricated restroom building for our Blue Cross Blue Shield playground right behind Town Hall. And so this is to do a little bit more of the groundwork that we need to do in order to put that pad out there and then put the restroom building on top. So we've got a little bit more money allocated for next year to make that happen. The next 4 projects are all going to be grant related for a TDEC grant that we've requested from the state of Tennessee. So the first one is replacing the AstroTurf at Field 2, which is the northernmost field at Mayor Bob Leonard Park. This is the very first field that we ever turfed back in 2012. So it's got a good 12 years of life out of this field. That's approximately $820,000, but that'll be basically just a recarpeting of what you see there on that field. Next up is redoing a lot of the walk trail and making some ADA repairs to the walk trail at Mayor Bob Leonard Park. Again, it's heavily used. It's very well worn. It's just time for maintenance on that trail, so that's another piece that we're going to be adding to the request. Next up is a dog park for McPhee Park. Again, another phase of the park. We're doing some parking lot renovations out there in the future as well, but the dog park would go really in the very far corner, I guess you could say far western end of the park, and have some areas that we can have our first dog park in town. And then finally is another turf replacement for Field 1, which is just on the western edge of Mayor Bob Leonard Park. And it would also include ADA access to that field from the Harrison Road parking lot, which currently is not ADA accessible. So this would add a little bit more to that project to make that happen. We've also had requests from neighbors in the area around McPhee Park for entrance gates to the park. Again, it's a relatively large park, relatively dark toward the back ends of those areas, so we want to add some entrance gates to that in next year's budget. And then engineering-wise, we have a couple large projects planned for next year. One is Union Road improvements, and those have been ongoing for several years now. We're currently in the right-of-way stages and phase of that project, but construction is planned for really I would say the payment of the construction is planned for next year, but this will take a good couple of years before that project is finally complete. And then that's an 80-20 split where the town pays 20% of the cost and the state and federal government are paying 80% of the cost for that project. We have a Watt Road roundabout that we're reviewing. We've got money in this year's budget currently to do some design work, next year to purchase the right-of-way, and then in 2026 to actually do the construction there. And it's right at the entrance, the southern entrance to Mayor Bob Leonard Park. And finally is our Campbell Station Road I-40 interchange project. And we have an agreement with the state of Tennessee to basically pay the same number every year you see on your screen, a little over $2 million to them for our portion of that $50+ million project. So this is again is to redo the interchange. It's going to move it a couple hundred yards to the west and make it a divergent diamond design. I know state of Tennessee is working on selecting a engineering firm right now, and so hopefully they'll get that finalized soon and be able to start doing some survey and some design on that relatively quickly. And with that, if you just look out over the next 6 years of our projects, you can see that the bulk of our projects deal with engineering. So road type projects are about $25 million, park projects at around $5.9 million, and then greenways and general government projects of around $11.5 million. So that's all I had tonight. I mean, I'm happy to try to answer any questions that the Planning Commission may have, but we would just recommend your consideration and recommendation to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen for the capital investment program.
Does anybody have any questions of David?
Got one. David, the 5.6 million on that very first slide you had for the opportunity for the acquisition of the property,
Yes, sir.
is that an additive into your overall budget, or are you doing some trade-offs and deferring something to another year or anything like that, or is it totally additive and you hadn't really not factored into any of the summary totals that we saw?
So two things are happening. One is we save money every year for land acquisition. So we have about $2 million saved strictly for land acquisition. So we're going to use those dollars for that. We also have something called undesignated fund balance in our general fund. And so we're going to be pulling from that undesignated fund balance to also help add to that purchase. So it'll be all cash when we go to purchase that land.
So there's no trade-offs, it's really coming from
Correct,
funds.
from savings.
Gotcha. Thank you.
I think the board has been very prudent in the way they have budgeted their funds over the last several years. We feel very confident that we'll be able to handle that project. And we're not going to be building that out right away, so I want to set expectations on this. It's going to take a few years before we get down the road and start programming it. We'll have master plans. We'll have many things. We got to acquire it first, though. So that's the biggest
You gotta have
piece.
the land first.
That's correct. Yep.
Anybody else have any questions or
Yeah,
comments?
David, you didn't talk about funding very well here, I mean, in general.
Mhm.
So the funding that we have, sources completely pays for all the expenditures that we have here, is that correct?
The revenue sources. Mark, can you go back to that slide? That'd be possible. Sorry. That would be, I think slide 24 or 25.
Is that it?
Yes. So the funding, maybe I'll show you a little bit more on the spreadsheets you have. The funding that we have transfers from general fund. So when we talk about money, transfers from general fund are monies that we anticipate getting from our general fund transferring to the CIP fund. That is around $22.5 million over the next 6 years. We've got a little over $10 million, $11 million in grants that we're going to be receiving, we anticipate receiving from the state of Tennessee. And then we also have CIP reserves of around $7.2 million, and then land acquisitions reserves of about $2 million.
We can fund everything from our current revenue sources.
Correct. So again, we anticipate and only budget for the year we're in right now. We project all future years. So if something happens and we cannot do a project or two because we have an economic downturn or we just don't have the funds to do it, we can stop and not go forward on anything that we haven't started already. So again, these are all projections going forward. The 1 year we're concerned about right now is FY24 that we're budgeting for starting July 1st. Yeah, you're welcome.
Anybody else, any questions or comments?
I'll move for approval.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Get back to the other, let me get back to the other PowerPoint.
Also, if anyone wishes to speak to one of the items on the agenda tonight, please pick up a blue card, fill it out, and give it to Mr. Shipley, and he will call on you when that item comes up. That's anyone in the audience, the applicants, we will call on.
It's back there, by the hand sanitizer. Okay, I'm ready.
Item number 4, discussion and public hearing on a site plan for building elevation associated with the Gems Platform Addition at First Baptist Church, 11704 Kingston Pike, zoned R-1, R1SA, Forrest Daniel and Associates applicant.
Yeah, this is a relatively minor site plan. Basically, they're bumping out the part of the educational building in that corner that you see on the screen there. This would basically expand a portion of the building just east of the existing gymnasium. They would match the brick with the brick of the existing facility. There would be about 4 parking spaces there that would be taken out with the expansion, and they're reworking the sidewalk and the landscape island in that area to accommodate this project. This particular addition is a little over 2,000 square feet, so it's relatively minor, and it's going to be about 4 feet lower than the elevation of the existing building. It'll come straight out, pretty much due east off of the existing building. It will provide for a platform area just east of the existing gym, some storage and utility space, and stairs and ramps. The new HVAC units are proposed to be roof mounted, and they'll be screened by the parapet that will be part of the project. There's no new external lighting that's associated with this particular addition. So from a staff's perspective, this proposed addition is pretty minimal. The staff does recommend approval of this particular site plan, subject to the 2 items that were included with the staff recommendations.
Anybody have any questions of Mark? Anybody on the planning commission?
That kind of shows you that shaded area is where the addition is going. It just kind of comes out to the flush to the end of the existing building in that corner.
What is that darker area, L
That's the
shape?
addition.
No, the L shape, the little,
A sidewalk.
oh, that's just a zone, okay.
Yeah.
Mark, can you tell us a little bit about the access point entrance?
And I do have some people that have signed up to speak on this, so whenever you're ready for that. Well, there won't be any direct access to this addition externally. It's like I said, it's going to be primarily an interior code-related project. So it doesn't really have much effect on the ground part of the site, other than those parking spaces, and just relocating the sidewalk, obviously, and they'll have to have a landscaped island at the end of that row of parking right here. That was one of the staff's comments as that needs to be addressed. And then the other one was just to show the parapet and how the parapet is going to be screening the HVAC units that would be part of this addition. So no other elements of the site would be affected with this particular project.
Anybody else on the planning commission have questions of Mark?
The applicant's here if you have any specific questions on the building addition itself.
The applicant would come up, please.
Hey, good evening. My name is Jeff Jordan with Forrest Daniel Associates Architects, Daphne, Alabama, 8007 American Way. The thought on the addition here is we're doing something very low maintenance exterior. We have all brick veneer, which matches most of the materials, or the main material on the existing building. We did not choose to put stucco bands around the top just because it's something else you have to maintain, and we know from past experience that you guys like to have majority brick buildings anyway, so that's what we were shooting for. The main thought here is to create a building that is minimal from the exterior, hardly any lost parking count, hardly any traffic gain, but something that would augment the interior of the building and let them use that for a better function.
Does anybody have any questions of the applicant?
Very simple.
You ready for the citizen comments? Okay. The first citizen that signed up is Jeannie Burkowski, and after Jeannie is Mary Ellen Brannon. Just remember, we have 5 minutes on these.
If the next person to speak would get back there and get ready to go when Jeannie gets through.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jeannie Brakalski. I live in the Bel Air neighborhood on Crestview Drive. I'm here speaking tonight both as a private citizen and as a member of the Farragut Neighborhood Preservation Partnership. I hope you all had an opportunity to review the documentation that was emailed to you earlier this week. If not, I brought you some that you can refer to later if you would like to. Members of the FNPP attended the April 4th, 2023 staff developer meeting during which tonight's agenda item 4 was discussed. During this meeting, representatives from FBC and CCS stated that an addition would be added onto the gymnasium, and one of the uses of this two-story space would be for storage. The representatives from FBC and CCS also noted that funding for this project has already been secured. This and the second-story construction projects are scheduled to begin late spring and early fall. First, I want to make it very, very clear that neither myself or the FNPP is opposed to the actual construction. Only the additional traffic that would be added to an already unsafe section of Kingston Pike with too many curb cuts too close together. Now that FBC is requesting approval of another site plan, wouldn't this be an appropriate time to revisit the long-promised permanent closure and rerouting of the old Bel Air Drive CCS driveway? The old Bel Air Drive CCS driveway curb cut to Kingston Pike was never intended to be a permanent access point for FBC and CCS. Once Bel Air Drive was located in 2008 at FBC's request, the old Bel Air curb cut along Kingston Pike was to be permanently closed and the driveway rerouted across from Rustgate Boulevard, where FBC used to have a driveway. To date, this has not taken place. We're asking that approval of this site plan, agenda item number 4, on tonight's agenda, be paused and approval be made conditional upon 1, applicant to submit an amended site plan for this above agenda item that includes permanent closure and rerouting of the old Bel Air Drive CCS driveway per the letter from the town of Farragut to First Baptist Concord, January 29th, 2008. The applicant is to submit an amended site plan which would clearly define and delineate a construction access entrance and staging site for construction equipment and vehicles for both the education building second-story addition that is to begin later this spring, as well as the agenda item listed above. Construction activity and noise is to be limited to weekdays during normal business hours. The old Bel Air Drive CCS driveway curb cut at Kingston Pike is too close to the relocated Bel Air Drive entrance. There is an inadequate distance for a deceleration lane for slowing down and turning right. Closing and rerouting the old Bel Air Drive and CCS driveway is not only long overdue, it is a community traffic and safety issue. Construction of these two projects without blocking and redirecting the old Bel Air Drive CCS driveway will compound the traffic and safety issues, and it will affect everyone who drives down Kingston Pike. If FBC and CCS construction traffic is added to the current traffic along the section of Kingston Pike, it will compound an already dangerous situation. We're concerned that more serious accidents, including loss of life, will occur. We are asking for your consideration of the site plan amendments that the Farragut Neighborhood Preservation Partnership is proposing in order to ensure a safer environment for all residents and visitors to Farragut. And just on a side note, this isn't just about the neighborhoods. It's about anyone who goes to CCS. It's about anyone who goes to FBC. It's about anyone who drives down Kingston Pike, no matter where they live or are visiting in our town. Our community safety needs to be a #1 priority. And it's my personal opinion that if the church can raise funding for these kind of projects, they should be able to come up with an idea for funding to honor their commitments and make Kingston Pike safer for all of us by closing the old Bel Air Drive and rerouting it to the place across Rustgate Drive. Thank you for your consideration and time.
Okay, next speaker is Mary Ellen Brennan, and after Mary Ellen is David White.
Mr. White will get back here and get ready to be next.
Thank you, Lori.
Clock's not showing up on the screen. I'm watching it here, though. I'll let you know if you get within 30
Thanks.
seconds. Sorry about that. Not sure what.
Thank you. My name is Mary Ellen Brannon. I live at 212 Battery Hill Circle. That's in Farragut Crossing. Anyone who lives in Bel Air, Shiloh, Glen Abbey, Derby Chase, or the surrounding area has heard, has witnessed, or has experienced vehicle accidents and near misses that occur in what I call the danger zone between Bel Air Drive and the First Baptist Concord and Concord Christian School curb cut, or what was once the old Bel Air Drive. I've given you two documents this evening. The first is an aerial view of the section of Kingston Pike that we're discussing. You can see the large church/school parking lot. To the left is the old Bel Air Drive, which First Baptist now uses as a private drive. To the right of the parking lot is the existing relocated Bel Air Drive. The second document that I've given you this evening is a copy of the 2021 Knoxville Regional Transportation Planning Organization, or TPO, traffic counts for Kingston Pike at Jamestown Boulevard. This monitoring point is only a couple of blocks east of Bel Air Drive and the FBC curb cut. In 2021, the average daily total traffic count for the monitoring location was almost 30,000 vehicles per day. That was in 2021, so it's a pretty safe bet that that volume of traffic is increased here in 2023. When Bel Air Drive was relocated in 2008, rather than closing the old Bel Air Drive curb cut as agreed, FBC simply expropriated the old Bel Air Drive curb cut and made it into a 3-lane entrance/exit for their own private use, and you can see this on that aerial view. You can also see the close proximity of the current 3-lane Bel Air Drive. This means that there are 6 lanes of traffic feeding into or off of Kingston Pike within a space of roughly 200 feet. Moreover, these 6 lanes are feeding in and out of that 30,000 plus average daily traffic count. The center turn lane on Kingston Pike at this location has been turned into a combination merge lane as well as a turn lane, both east and west. It's an incredibly dangerous combination. I'd like to read a quote from TDOT. Every access point constructed on the state highway system increases the crash risk. The cumulative impact of closely spaced access points over time is one of the largest contributors to high crash rates and congestion on state highways. By creating their own private entrance exit into a major state highway, FBC and CCS have created an exceedingly unsafe intersection at Kingston Pike and the old Bel Air Drive curb cut. This already critical situation will be greatly exacerbated if construction for the FBC CCS projects is routed through that intersection. In reviewing the correspondence and FMPC meeting minutes from 2008, it seems clear that the original intent by the town of Farragut was to close the old Bel Air Drive curb cut once the new Bel Air Drive was complete. Doing so at that time would have eliminated the safety issues we now experience on a daily basis. Tonight, we're asking you to prohibit construction traffic in that dangerous zone. We're also asking you to remedy the day-to-day danger that exists by permanently closing that FBC CCS curb cut as originally agreed. This situation should not be ignored. We believe it's within your purview to prevent serious injury or a fatality by closing that curb cut concomitant with the review of this proposed site plan. That's all. Thank you.
And the last speaker that signed up is David White.
Good evening. David White, 314 Vista Trail, Bel Air subdivision. I won't speak to the construction of the building. And I think these two ladies did an excellent job on talking about the safety of that some people call the entrance to Concord Baptist Church. But it is not an entrance. It is old Bel Air Drive. Always has been, always will be. Unless you make the decision to change it. I want to read to you from the original ordinance, March 20th, 2008. Upon completion of the construction of the new Bel Air and recording of the final plat, the town of Farragut relinquishes ownership to the old Bel Air right-of-way through quitclaim deed to First Baptist Church of Concord. That's the first problem. And one of these questions may be a question for our town attorney, because they were supposed to prepare a quitclaim deed which allowed the town to give the right-of-way back to the church. That was never done. It's supposed to be recorded at the courthouse. It's never been done. In section 22, 148 of the code, no driveway or other means of access of any right-of-way to any road, street, highway within the limits of the town shall be constructed, nor shall be any existing driveway or other means of access be altered except pursuant to permit issued by the town. In the submission of an access permit, excuse me, my voice is a little messed up. The submission of an access permit application shall be required. It's never been done. No permit for that access and egress. No permit application ever been done. No quitclaim deed giving it back to the church. No DOT permits ever been issued there. Once the DOT permit was issued for the new entrance of Bel Air, the old permit was dissolved. Three things already indicate that getting in and out at that location is not only unsafe, it's illegal. Shouldn't be there. So what we're asking you all to do is make some kind of decision on that illegal entrance. Because once you put construction traffic on there, the safety increases dramatically. And if we still own the right-of-way, are we liable and are we responsible for that road that's there right now? And I think our attorney will have to answer that question. But that's the question. Are we? Are we not? I don't know. I'm not an attorney. But we still own that right-of-way because it's never been deeded back to the church. It has no permit. So I would appreciate the fact that y'all would consider before your decision tonight to maybe put this off and look at all the information, and I have a ton of it relative to that entrance. And also on when it talked about the final plat, you won't see that entrance anywhere on the final plat that's recorded at the courthouse. It's not on there. So all those things are relative to the construction, and they affect it drastically. Because before you can approve something to be built, you have to have a legal way to get to it with materials, and I agree with the ladies. The best and pertinent situation is to close that entrance immediately and then resolve some sort of temporary access for construction activities at a later date. That gives the church people and school people an opportunity to get used to not going in and out there. But you could still have the entrance available to use for construction before you closed it permanently. That's my speech. Thank you.
Anyone else, Mark?
No one else signed up for that, no.
Does anybody on the planning commission have any questions or comments?
I make a comment. I think it got to separate the two things. I think, we've got to, this stands on its merits. I don't see necessarily holding it hostage, so to speak. But I think the town, there's enough facts and stuff. I was on the planning commission back in 2008, and I can remember certain commitments, obviously not verbatim. My memory's not that good. But I think the town owes it to the citizens of Bel Air to research this from 2008 forward and see what is the church accountable for it right now and need to deal with it. They've got an issue, and they need to look into it. I don't think that's a planning commission. That's looking at the current situation and looking from the historical record and through what's registered, not registered, TDOT, what have you. But we need to get to the bottom of it. It's just going to be a continuing, festering issue unless we do that.
I would agree, Ed, with what you said. I don't see the merit of holding this construction project hostage to the issue of the road. We've had a couple of allegations here about the safety and the danger of that intersection. And I thought I heard something about increased traffic as a result of this construction. I don't see that. Maybe there is some, but I don't see it. And I'm not quite sure. This sounds like an issue, but it doesn't sound like an issue to be presented to the Planning Commission. Typically, we are looking at some particular plan and then trying to resolve if that's a good plan or not and something we want to do. This sounds like a problem that needs to be addressed perhaps to the mayor and alderman and then identified as an object for investigation, and once it's been investigated, determine what the cause was and what the resolution is, and then eventually it might end up back here again with the solution to the problem. But I don't see that as an issue for us to decide tonight. Thank you.
No, I think the problem is that they don't have the ability to hold anyone's feet to the fire unless we have something to hold their feet to the fire. This has gone on since, what, 2008? So.
But if that was truly a commitment in 2008, then there's what you can hold their feet to the fire on. And that needs to be looked at from, I think, from the town's official position on that and what you can do to hold them accountable for making commitments.
I also have the concern of what they're talking about, construction traffic. Kind of construction traffic are we going to anticipate? I imagine there's no grading, dirt, and dirt moving, any of that happening.
This would be relatively small construction traffic. The building is most likely going to be built with concrete masonry units, concrete block, so small units rather than large steel. It'd be a slab on grade, and the only real grading that would take place would be just for that footprint itself. It's very self-contained, so we don't feel that.
You'd have to have a footer, wouldn't you?
Sir?
You'd have to have a footer, wouldn't you?
Yes, sir. But it's all within that 2,000 square feet of the actual building. There's nothing that extends outside of that.
So you're going to have a backhoe there to do this work?
There would be.
Okay, so that's going to be what your construction traffic, so you don't foresee pulling dirt out of there?
I guess I would see the difference between ongoing regular construction traffic on a daily basis and one piece of equipment that would show up at the beginning and stay till all the preliminary or the site work was done.
You'd have delivery of a concrete block?
Yes, sir.
You'd have delivery of brick,
We would.
delivery of roofing,
Yes, sir.
whatever wood it's going to take to do the finish build out?
That is correct. But once again, no large steel joists, nothing in the realm of what I would consider large construction.
So you're not going to have a crane or anything there?
With the CMU, there would be no need to do it. The only thing, if they needed a lull to set the bar joist on top, but once again, we're talking 2,000 square feet, so it's a very small number of bar joist and metal deck that you'd have on it.
Okay.
Anybody else have any questions or comments?
We do have, when you're driving this, and I've pulled in Glen Abbey a few times, this is an accident waiting to happen. I'm not sure if there's been accidents there. I'm sure there has been. This is an issue that this town has to resolve. I know this is done. The Glen Abbey and Confederacy Circle were allowed to be put in so close together I don't understand that. And this all compounds it. And I understand that this is something that there were some sounds like promises made or plans were made, and those plans haven't come to fruition. But the church needs to start looking at resolving this situation. They're getting a lot more attendance in their schools, and obviously the church traffic. I share the residents' concerns about this, and I don't know how we fix this.
I'm not comfortable with making any decision tonight without Mr. Hale's, something from Mr. Hale, our lawyer. I don't see that we're in a position really to do that at this point with what's been brought up.
While Tom's coming up, I'm going to make an observation from good planning design. If this was a new construction, what we would want here and require is to close the old Bel Air and give the church access to the new Bel Air. That's part of our connectivity requirements, and I'm sure but the Bel Air neighborhood's going to say no, we don't want that. But good planning and connectivity and tying it with our land use plan would say give them access to the new Bel Air Drive.
Well, and it looks like on the plat map that there was a release done in 2009. And I can't tell whose signature it is, but it does have a signature above Town of Farragut in the upper left-hand corner. It says release of easements. So.
The KGIS does not show the old right-of-way, the old public right-of-way from the old Bel Air. Now again, KGIS is not the most perfect source of data, but nevertheless, I'd like to hear what the town attorney has to say, and maybe he could opine on what our decision should be based upon tonight.
I was around.
Tom, tell us who you are.
Yeah, Tom Hale, town attorney. This whole situation with the old Bel Air and new Bel Air, and those of us who were around at the time, it was a pretty unusual situation that really was done to accommodate a lot of different interests. The residents in Bel Air were not happy that the church had access to Old Bel Air on both sides and could come and go as they wished, and they didn't like the fact that the church people parked on Bel Air. So the idea was to move Bel Air and create a situation where the church had no access to it. And the idea was to swap the right-of-way. That new Bel Air was built on property owned by the church, and they built it and paid for it, the church did, and the town was then gonna, once the project was finished, was then deed the old Bel Air right-of-way to the church. And apparently, that I've been trying to reach John King, who represented the church at the time, So he and I can figure out why in the world we didn't prepare a deed at that time, which I don't think we did. I haven't been able to find one. I don't think that creates any problem liability-wise for the town. The town, I don't think, I mean, every road you put accessing Kingston Pike is going to create some degree of increased risk. So I'm not concerned about liability issues related to the use of this access point. I do believe, though, and actually, we've actually had a meeting with the church a couple of 3 months ago to talk about what their plans are, because there's no question you can read the documents yourself, there was no question whatsoever that the understanding was that at some point the church was going to redesign its entrance, tear down those two A-frames, and that's where the access point would be. A lot of things have happened in the intervening period with respect to the church. I guess they can probably explain that, but whatever has happened, they have not gotten to the point where they have decided they want to, they haven't been in a position to give up use of the A-frames apparently, but I'll let them talk about that. The real issue here from a legal standpoint in my mind is I think that the town, I don't think the Planning Commission probably has the authority to do it, but I think the town itself, through the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, probably has the authority, if it decides or concludes that this is a dangerous situation, to take action and close the temporary, what was to be a temporary entrance. But I don't think we don't normally, at least I advise against, holding projects hostage for things that are not directly related to that issue. This is not, to me, directly related to the issue. I don't see how the construction of that little bitty building, relatively speaking, is going to create a lot of additional traffic that can't enter and exit through the other exit way, which there is another one. So that would be my thought. We've been in active discussion with the church about, and I think the church knows that we are interested in them moving forward and doing what I think everybody agrees they said they were going to do at some point. They just hadn't gotten to that point. They've had problems that I'll let them describe what their problems are. But I do think that the town has the authority to do some things to bring that about, but I'm not sure that it's really within your all's purview to do that. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them. I'd like to get that entrance lined up across from Russ Field and do away with the temporary access myself. But I'm not sure holding this little building hostage is really the way to do that, especially when we're in the process of talking to them about trying to move forward on some other solution.
I have a question. It sounds like we're not sure that transfer of title ever occurred, correct? So if
I'm pretty confident it did not.
So if we still own that property, it makes it pretty easy for the town to close the entrance, doesn't it?
Well, if we own it, I guess we can close it.
So it sounds like we do have a way to make that happen without holding this project hostage.
And I think we'd have a way even if we had, even if we had transferred it. I think we still would have the authority if we felt it was if a determination was made that it was a dangerous situation and should be
I don't even think we have
stopped.
to make that determination.
Well, that's exactly.
We decided to close
We still own it.
So, but again, I think it's not the purview of the Planning Commission to mix these two issues. I really do believe that the Planning Commission should deal with the plan here and
Yep.
and make a decision based on its merits. And the issue with the road change, I really think should be passed on to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen and make that an issue for, as regard to safety and prior commitments, et cetera.
I do know that the church has hired counsel, and I've been in touch with counsel a couple of times. He's here tonight. I don't know if he wants to speak to this issue or not, but he's here. Anybody have any other questions for me?
15 years is long enough. We need to
It's-
resolve
yeah,
this.
it's-
And I agree totally. That's why I know where remarks, we can't hold this hostage, in my opinion, as well. And the fact that the town needs to take some,
Yeah.
look into this and take some action.
Yeah, they taught me in business school that everything's relative, but 15 years for a temporary entrance to a, that's pretty long.
Any more questions of Mr. Hale?
There is a plat note that addresses this exactly. And it's, I'm referring to a plat that goes all the way back to 2010, that specifically talks about access and demolition. What triggers, according to the plat note,
It's the removal of the A-frames, right?
well, they call it the old sanctuary.
Yeah.
So there can be no renovation or approval for any remodeling, those are the actual words, and or modifications to the old sanctuary building without basically the entrance being relocated specifically, and it does talk about tying in directly across from, was it Rustfield?
Rustgate.
Rustgate.
Well, that was the plan. There's no question that was the plan.
Yeah,
And
but what triggers it, I mean, there's not necessarily a timeline in there.
there's not.
It says the old Bel Air Drive is temporary. This access shall be eliminated at such time when the old buildings, comma, flat tops and A-frame buildings, A, B, C, and D, which are actually located on the plat, are demolished. Such demolition shall occur prior to any town approvals for any remodeling and or modifications to the old sanctuary building. At the time the old buildings are demolished, a new driveway to line up with Rustgate Boulevard shall be constructed, and the existing driveway located immediately to the west of the old church sanctuary shall be eliminated. I wonder if that's actually east. It might have been east of the old. I think that's
No, there was a,
the old sanctuary there.
at one time, when you pulled in front of the old sanctuary, you come up the hill and there was an exit right there. They since tore that out
Okay.
and planted grass.
Okay.
And that's what that's referencing to.
And then it does refer to an ordinance 08-05, master concept plan, Exhibit B. And so there is some legal documentation. I'm not seeing anything that would trigger us tonight in denying the application before us. I'm not an attorney. We have our town attorney right here. But there obviously is some requirements that are triggered by certain events that does require that the old Bel Air Drive get relocated. I mean, it is black and white in a recorded document.
Yeah, there's no question that's what the plan was. And there's no question that there was an agreement that they could use that entrance that they're using temporarily. The problem is things happen and it's not temporary anymore. It needs to be, we need to get it rectified, and I think we're about doing that. So, I mean, I think that's essentially where we are.
I agree with the, what they've got here is, I don't think is a trigger point. From what I've been told, and this is just from what I've been told, is that the trigger would be, they're using that area now for a school. They plan on adding on to the building to make a school, another level, and assuming that that's where it was going to be, moving what's in the flat tops or whatever you want to call that area, the old area, I guess, to the new area that they're building. And I think that that's what the long-term plan is now. I don't know if that there was a long-term plan before, I never did see it, but it just, there's what's on the plat, and I guess really what you remember. Because Ruth Hawk's not here any longer, and she was the one sitting here with you when this was discussed and with Tom, so
The thing is, the plans for the church have continued to grow and grow and grow since then. And I don't even know if they envisioned that back at that time, but the fact is, 15 years is way too long for a temporary solution. This thing's gotten way too big. It's something that needs to be dealt with and addressed now, and not just kicked down the road. And I think that's what you all are looking at there.
Excuse me, can I just?
Any more questions or comments? And if you want a question or comment, please come to the microphone.
Thank you. In the information that was emailed to y'all, and I left you copies of, there is, for example, there is a copy of a letter, that's the second page of a letter where it talks about as soon as possible closing Bel Air Drive. And I've also, there's also should be the copy of the letter from First Baptist Church's attorney, where they talk about they will obviously do what we said we will do, in the town tapes and court reporters transcript will reflect what we said. And one of the things they had said in this letter is close Bel Air, Old Bel Air Drive as soon as possible. And that's been brought up, of course, quite a bit tonight. The FNPP, we had a meeting with David Smoke, Mark Shipley, and Trevor Hobbs here a couple of months ago. And one of the things we talked about as a possible solution is wouldn't even have to tear down anything. They're just eyeballing it based on what we consider minimum acceptable widths of roads, driveways, safety, and so forth. It looks like it should be wide enough that off of the old Bel Air Drive, you could do a curb cut where there's grass currently, and you just would turn and go in front of the smaller A-frame and connect with Rustgate Drive. Because from the meeting that my husband and I had with Blake from the church last summer, they anticipated another good 15 years of use from those buildings. So why not find another solution? And this would be something that, for right now, would be a lot less expensive than, tearing down a couple of buildings. And it would also address the safety and traffic issues. And should still be enough room, because there's already a sidewalk there. They would have enough room for a driveway, and could even have room for a safety fence, on the opposite side of their driveway, if that's something they consider. That's something that the residents of the neighborhoods and the people who travel up down Kingston Pike, I'm sure we would all be fine with that. We've already had several accidents in front of this area. In fact, there was a bad one in front of the church here a couple of months ago. It's not just the heaviness of the traffic. We have issues with people seem to forget that there's a subdivision behind the church, and we'll be going to turn into our subdivision, and they'll come tearing down the turning lane. And actually, I know one person that got rear-ended because she was going to the church. And, she, of course, felt horrible about it, but there's been a lot of times, I think pretty much all of us have had many near misses. And also, if you're heading east, coming down Kingston Pike in your right-hand lane, you don't dare turn your signal light on until you're actually just past the entrance to CCS and FBC, because if you do, they will pull out in front of you because they assume you're going to the church. And we're like, no, I'm trying to go home. So, I hope that's something y'all will consider. I hope some of the church will consider.
All the things that Jeannie brought up, that is a reason why we have the 400-foot rule on major arterials for curb cuts, is for that exact reason. So when you have your blinker on, it's appropriate, you're not feeling like you have to turn your blinker on at the last minute. I mean, there's no doubt that the design that's currently being used is not the best design.
Well, we can't stand another 15 years the way it is, folks. That's a fact. So my suggestion would be to take it to the church and discuss some possible solutions.
Are you making a motion, Mayor, in
Yes.
some form?
Yes, I am.
Is that to table, postpone, deny, approve?
Let's just postpone it.
Taylor Forrester, 1111 North Shore Drive, Knoxville, Tennessee, 37919. Here on behalf of First Baptist Church Concord, we would request, that, as been repeatedly discussed here tonight, is that this has no bearing, no impact on the access. The use that is happening here, we're constructing a small improvement to build a permanent stage. We already have a temporary stage that we put up, take down, put up, take down. Therefore, there is no higher intense use. There is no additional traffic resulting from this construction. 15 years, that's the first I've heard of that. The church recognizes that they have an obligation, and they're committed to see that obligation through. It's not just as simple as sketching out a road. There's going to have to be detailed engineering design work done on this. We have the existing A-frame buildings, and so the use hasn't, the issue hasn't been the money as of recent. The issue is what do we do with the uses in those buildings? Those are actively used on a daily basis, and we have to figure out how to relocate those. We are looking at that. We are working on that. I can say that conceptually that process has begun. But it's not just as simple as submitting a site plan for a new road. There are other factors that have to be considered. And I think if I was following the proposed design of the road, I don't know that is an appropriate access. I'd obviously turn that over to an engineer, but it seems like you're going to create some sharp angles that could result in busy times, traffic stacking out onto Kingston Pike. Again, we would ask that this planning commission follow their ordinances for site plan approval. The requirements, regulations listed in your ordinance for site plan approval. And if you look at those and you follow those, we satisfy all those. Planning staff has determined that we satisfied those, made a recommendation that those be approved, that this site plan be approved. I would say it's not proper to table this or postpone this when it does meet the requirements for site plan approval. We'd ask that you move forward with deciding the approval or not, rather than any kind of postponement or tabling.
Taylor, I respectfully disagree. I think it's time to do it. We spend money on doing this project right here, but yet nothing's happening with fixing the issue. At some point, the issue has to be fixed. If those folks was told by Blake and them that they had a 15 more years of life expectancy of that building, we can't wait 15 years. This should have been done a long time ago. That's what I got to say.
We've already waited 15.
I think what he's talking about is if the agreement was in 2008 and it's 2023, I think that's where he's deriving 15 years.
Yeah.
He said another 15.
And I would,
Another 15
on
years
top
of
of
life.
it.
Okay, I got you.
and I'd also submit and take issue with your comment about the church honoring their commitments. There's a track record here of not doing that the way that things have been said or put in writing. Not just on this item.
If I may have another comment. I think some people have actually missed something. This is not an access to the church and never has been.
Well, I don't think we
This
missed
is
it.
the old Bel Air Drive.
David, I don't think we missed it.
It's illegal. Well, some people have made comments. The exit should not exist because it's illegal on every form.
Well, they don't own it.
And the other thing, if you look at the original ordinance, you see two site plans. Site plan A, Site Plan B. They're called 1 and 2 on the other drawing. B has that access across from from Village Green in it. That's the one the old planning commission at the time, that's the one they picked.
Yeah, that's
But
what
they
I-
didn't get it.
That's what I'm saying. I was on it at that time, and
The approved
Irritation.
the approved plat, and I have a copy of it, the approved plat does not show any access to Kingston Pike. When it was going to be turned over and deeded over, then it became an easement. So it should be an easement right now and not an entrance. There's no doubt it's illegal. So you talk about having a right to closing? Sure you do. It doesn't comply to anything. Nothing. It's not supposed to be there. It's like it just showed up out of the blue. So I'm not talking about holding up the construction of that job. Just figure out another way to get to it. To think you're not going to have equipment and materials go through that illegal entrance to get to the job, it's going to happen every day, and that's going to be added to the church traffic. A simple solution is to temporarily close it now, just like we do for the parade. Put up the barricades, not let church traffic use it. When they start the construction, if they need access with construction materials, then let them open it up and use it. When that's done, close it permanently, and we're done. Nobody's hurt, nobody's affected, and we don't care whether they ever put that other entrance in or not. It was an option. They had two options. You saw them on the drawings. It's on the original drawing. They chose to take the first option, which was not put the new access in. Okay, they can put that in anytime they want to. It's an option. It's not a requirement. That's my comment, guys. It's illegal. It's not supposed to be there. We're not talking about closing down their construction. We're just saying we're not going to let you and the church traffic use it because it's too dangerous. Somebody's going to get killed. And some people have asked, has anybody been hurt there before? I don't know. But are we going to ask the citizens of the town to volunteer? Whose mother and child wants to be first? Raise your hand. No, it needs to be closed. And you guys need to make the construction of the building contingent upon that entrance being closed because it's illegal. That's my opinion. Thank you.
My problem is that you guys shouldn't be the planning commission. The planning commission, I don't believe, has the authority to close roadways. The planning commission is vested with the authority to approve or disapprove, or recommend or not recommend plans that have been presented to us in the agenda tonight. I believe if there's an issue with that driveway, that needs to be handled by the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, and some decision arrived. And if they want to close it, then that's a prerogative that the mayor and aldermen have, not the planning commission. I believe that we should approve this or disapprove this plan based on the merits presented tonight.
Could we make an emotion subject to temporarily closing the entrance, or with the Board of Mayor and Aldermen coming up with the church a solution to close it and have a second or another entrance? Does that make sense?
My motion was never seconded, so I withdraw it.
So you're withdrawing, and I'm talking about making a motion. I haven't made a motion. I want to get some feedback.
I've withdrew my motion.
Okay, then I'll make
So
that.
Floor is open for a motion.
I'll make the motion that we have a subject to that closes the road during construction, and in the meantime, the Board of Mayor and Aldermen works out something with the church to come up with a solution, or that for a new second entrance, or the old entrance stays closed permanently.
I'm going to bring it up again. Why is access to Bel Air, which is a public right-of-way owned by the taxpayers, actually, I think it was, the construction was paid by the church. Again, I did see a plat note that the church agreed to not access it, but why is that not even on the table? I mean, it seems like that's such an obvious solution. It would require a change to the plat.
Well, I wouldn't support that.
You need to come up to the microphone.
I have looked at the plat, but it is poor design and planning to not allow access to Bel Air. I mean, that actually eliminates,
I totally
the
disagree with that.
future curb cut at Rustgate, and then would eliminate this temporary old Bel Air curb cut. I just don't, I mean, to me, there's plenty of stacking distance. I was not on the planning commission in 2008, so I don't remember, nor do I have direct knowledge of exactly what it was agreed to, but it's poor planning and design to not allow them to have access to Bel Air, the new Bel Air.
Well, you'll have to change you'll have to change the ordinance,
Well, you'd have to change the plat.
because the ordinance says access to First Baptist Church to Bel Air Drive is eliminated.
That was part of the discussion
That was
of the
part of the-
neighborhood back then, that they
Yes.
would not have that traffic thrown out on the new Bel Air Drive. That was a part of that relocation.
So there was some negotiation quid pro quo that was all part of that. But
Correct, and it's part of the ordinance.
it's still bad design.
Well,
I mean, if this was a new church on a vacant piece of property, we would actually only give them access to Bel Air Drive.
well, I understand what you're saying, but that's not the problem. The problem, and I'm sorry I repeat myself,
No, it's okay.
the egress and access is not an entrance. It's Old Bel Air Drive. And going in and out of there right now is illegal. I've got a handful of things that y'all haven't seen that you're welcome to see sometime if you want to, but it's illegal on every turn. It should not be there. It needs to be closed. It's that simple.
Well, I can read that in the plat note, what you said. There was no doubt there was an agreement and an intention. Unfortunately, it was left open as to the time frame of when that temporary entrance should be closed. And I don't think as a planning commissioner, I have the ability to, because when I interpret the plat note, I don't see them in violation of the plat note. Maybe in the spirit of the plat note, but not verbatim, word for word in violation of the plat note.
Well, what's confusing you is the note on the plat which references that their new entrance will be installed when the A-frames and the two flat tops are torn down. But unfortunately, those two don't have anything to do with each other, because the original planning commission and the mayor and alderman intended for the old Bel Air Road to be closed.
I agree.
But they gave them the option, if they wanted another entrance, certainly they could have it.
That's not how I read the plat note. The plat note says there's step A and step B, and it's contingent upon step C.
Well, it don't say contingent.
It says subject to the following event
Right.
occurring. And so
The road will
I
be-
don't, again, there were some intentions and some promises made, but when I read the document that's recorded at the courthouse, I don't see them as in violation of that particular plat note.
They can put that other entrance in any time that road was, if it was closed today, they could put that entrance in next month, the other one. It has no effect on the old Bel Air Drive.
I agree.
Thank you.
Make a motion.
He did make a motion. He
Made a
didn't
motion?
second.
I second it.
Well,
Trying to think
Want me to see if I can repeat what you said?
Did you write it down?
Have something.
Let me hear it.
The motion was to add a condition of approval that's subject to the road, to that access being closed. And that while the Board of Mayor and Alderman, I guess, works with the church on trying to figure out a solution to dealing with the access.
I think what he said was closed during construction.
Just during
During
construction.
And then not opened unless there's an agreement
There
between
we
the
go.
town and the church. Especially if it still belongs to the town.
you might as well shut their project down. You are absolutely going to cut the school off at the knees if you close that entrance without an alternative in place.
Better get busy on alternative.
Well, I know there's another entrance. It is a circuitous entrance over on the west side, and you can go Federal Boulevard. But that's not going to be. I mean, I'm making an observation. We're basically telling them, no, you can't do this because they're going to make a disaster with their
It's
school
going to be like
traffic.
6 vehicles coming in.
What's the time frame on this? Because there will not be that kind of traffic this summer with the school. Is that correct?
And the original plan was to come in at Federal Boulevard, go a block, take a left, come down through there to the church, drop the kids off, turn right around, and come back out to the light at Federal Boulevard. That's how Dr. Sager originally laid it out. I mean, that has since morphed into a situation where the majority of the people don't do that. They come out that back entrance right there.
I agree.
To answer your question on time frame, we haven't started doing architectural plans on this project yet. We're only here for planning commission approval. If we were to achieve that, we would start doing construction drawings, and that would take approximately 2 to 3 months. Then bidding, so it's 3 months out, most likely.
Okay. So the possibility of doing it this summer while school would not be in session is not feasible.
I don't believe this project would be ready to start this summer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do we have any more questions or comments from the planning commission?
My only comment would be a comment on the motion that say that sounds like we're gonna have the town and the church work something.
Can't hear you.
To have the town and the church work something out. I think the town ought to be more in dictating what the solution is. They can talk to the church and take input, but I don't think that it's some kind of, 50-50 discussion, quite frankly.
Again, I'll ask Mr. Hale to chime in here, but in my opinion, I believe that condition would be an illegal condition on a site plan consideration. I mean, your ordinance is very clear as to what we have to meet for site plan approval. And this site plan meets that. Adding an open-ended condition of two parties working something out before something can be approved, I would submit as an illegal condition on a site plan approval. Tom, I don't know, you got any comment?
We can turn it down then. That's the other option.
I'd like to make a motion.
Wait a minute, we have one
Have a
more person.
motion on the floor already.
I'll remove my motion. Go ahead.
You're rescinding your motion.
Rescinding it.
Okay.
I'd just like to remind you that they do have another curb cut. It goes into their large parking area on the west side of their property. It's between Rustgate and Boring Road. They have another curb cut there. So circuitous or not, you could have traffic coming in to that entrance. And I don't think it would, whether it's for the school or for the church, there is that other option for them for access.
I'd like to make a motion. I'd recommend approval of item number 4 for the site plan for building elevations associated with the gym platform addition at First Baptist Church, 11704 Kingston Pike, Zone R3, R13SA.
With the, is that with the subject twos?
Subject to the two.
Is that
No
to the-
subject to.
Subject to.
No, sir.
Not even the ones that are recommended by staff?
Well, we got to have those.
But the
Oh, yeah,
gentleman who
excuse
made
me,
the
yeah,
motion,
subject
we
twos
need to
here,
make
yeah,
sure what his intentions are.
Okay, we hear you.
Got a second from Scott?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so we,
Need to take a roll call vote, or you have a
Yes.
discussion on the motion?
Roll
or-
call.
but I have a question on the, that where does that, we do have the, we are talking about the subject twos that are listed, correct?
About a straight motion on that right there.
What's printed?
The
As
two
presented.
subject twos from the staff. Yeah, that's what he's talking about.
Okay.
And from a discussion standpoint, I would agree with the motion, because of the fact that's what we said originally. I agree with Mr. Hale that, we need to separate the two, but we have to strongly focus on that second part. Up to and, gosh, it's our entrance. We can go out there and close it tomorrow morning. That would, you know, there's an old saying, the side of the news focuses the mind. You know, the closure of the road would focus the design and getting on with taking action on your commitments.
Okay. Everybody, can you go with read the motion back to give us,
Well, the motion was from Commissioner Green to approve the site plan subject to the two staff conditions.
okay. So, all those in favor?
Seconded by
that we're-
Commissioner Russ.
You're going to do a roll call vote?
Okay.
Okay, on the motion, Commissioner Myers,
Aye.
Commissioner Preston,
Aye.
Commissioner Russ,
Aye.
Mayor Williams,
Nay.
Chairman Holliday,
Nay.
Commissioner St. Clair,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Pavlin,
Nay.
Commissioner Green,
Aye.
and Commissioner Pinchot.
Nay.
So it passes 5-4, site plan.
Moving on to item number 5, discussion on public hearing on a site plan for the third retail building for the Little Turkey Creek Commons, Phase 3, 12500 Kingston Pike, 11.84 acres, zoned C-1, Simi Busby Architects applicant.
Finishing up my minutes here. Hold on a second. Okay, this particular item involves the third building that's part of the Little Turkey Creek Commons development, just to the west of Old Stage Road. The development's been ongoing for several years. The first building, which is the largest building, actually obtained a site plan approval in 2005. And they are just now finishing up the second building. The tenant just received their certificate of occupancy earlier this week. And so this one is for the third building, which is the easternmost building there on the screen. This is also a building that's just slightly larger than the second building, a little over 10,400 square feet. The site was really pre-graded, and the parking lot was installed back originally, and so they've just now added the next two buildings, or they're proposing this third building to finish out the project. So there's not really a lot of site work, mainly just utility extension into the building. Since the project has taken a while, the two newer buildings have been required to meet our architectural design standards, so they both are over 75% brick. This one is 78% brick. The architect is here. He's got some samples if you do want to see what the third building would look like. It's going to be very similar to the second building, but if you do have any specific questions, then Mr. Marlino is here if you wanted to ask him anything. The staff does recommend approval of this site plan subject to the 5 comments that were included in the staff's recommendations. That's an image of what the building would look like. Again, very similar to Building 2. A little bit of some minor differences, but very similar to Building 2.
Mark, this is probably just related to the whole site plan. I'm noticing on your tree, it's stating where trees have been replaced. So have they resolved all of those situations?
Most of the trees, a couple of the species weren't available, so we're still working on finishing those out for
Okay.
the ones that were topped. Yeah, so
Okay.
they've been working on it incrementally.
All right.
We have a letter of credit in place to ensure that it'll be finished.
I didn't notice, were there any additional ground mounted signs, or is that just the one that's there
Just the
currently?
two, there's two actually that are there now
Two
on the
just got-
property.
okay.
Mhm.
Does anybody on the planning commission have any questions of Mark before we get to the applicant?
Mark, did we pick up the bike hoops on these newer buildings?
Yeah, because we have no bike park.
Any provision for it?
Yeah, I think we did pick those up, actually.
Yeah, they're between the first and second building.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Because I remember seeing them, and I was out there, I just couldn't remember where they were at.
I locked mine to it here a while back when I
Hmm.
went to the pizza
Yeah,
place.
I knew I'd seen it, I couldn't remember.
That way you earned your pizza when you rode your bike there.
That's right.
Okay, do you have any, will you tell us who you are and give us an address, please?
Sure. I'm Robert Marlino with Smee Busby Architects, and our office address is 2554 Sutherland Avenue in Knoxville, 37919. I just want to go over the design real quick, just very quickly. I think Mark outlined the site plan very well, but the design is, we are using the same materials as Building 2. So the same brick, the same two bricks, the same storefront, the same ephes color, but the design is simplified a bit. We removed the pilasters. We don't have an overhang, so instead we have some awnings coming out, and the storefront is higher, so it is a little bit simplified design. This is intended to be for one tenant, so that's part of the simplification. Instead of the bays being very prominent in Building 2, we're making them less prominent and more suited for a single tenant, so that's the intent. However, it can be subdivided later into 6 tenants, so just wanted to mention that.
For what it's worth, I actually like the canopies better, or the awnings better than the integrated I think the integrated canopies, look like strip malls right out of the 80s and 90s. And I think by using the awnings, I think it modernizes the buildings a little bit. So I kind of support you with making that change. I think it's a little classier look.
Anybody else have any questions or comments?
I'm going to make a motion to approve with the subject twos.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you, appreciate it. And as far as clarifications on the subject twos, I'll just get with Mark, with you about that.
Yeah.
Just,
Yeah.
all right, thank you very much, appreciate it. Have a good night.
Thank you, Robbie.
Thank you.
Item number 7, discussion and public hearing on a request to amend the Farragut zoning map for 630 Everett Road, 2.3 acres from R-2 general single-family residential to R-1 rural single-family residential. Michael Rana, applicant.
Yeah, this is a parcel that predates the town, and it's basically been developed around. It's surrounded by Berkeley Park, the Battery at Berkeley Park, and Hickory Woods. And it's accessed by a long driveway that goes all the way down to Everett Road. The property, when the Battery was platted a few years ago, we actually, part of that driveway up to Miss Henry's old house was paved and converted to a walking trail access easement. So this rezoning doesn't have any impact on that. It will still be used in that same regard. Basically, this particular property, it's currently zoned general single-family residential R2, and that particular zoning district is really intended for traditional subdivisions, smaller lots, typically less than half an acre. So agricultural uses in R2 are limited to tracts that are over 5 acres, and then it's only crops. You can't have any farm animals. So basically, they're requesting to rezone this a little over 2-acre tract to R1, which is frankly more compatible with the size of the tract. R1 is rural, single-family residential, and it does allow farm animals if you have more than an acre. And so that's really the reason for the rezoning request. This particular parcel, because of its age, is not part of a subdivision, doesn't have any private restrictions that I'm aware of. And it really cannot be further subdivided because of its access situation. Future land use map shows most of this area is very low density residential, which the rezoning would be consistent with that. And really the R1 would be a better fit as far as a zoning district than the R2 for this tract, given its size and characteristics. So the staff is in support of Resolution PC-23-06, which recommends approval of Ordinance 23-05 to rezone this parcel from R2 to R1.
Mark, is this the second time this has ever happened?
What's that?
Downzone,
They go from R2 to R1.
Oh, down to,
that at the property over there on Union Road just recently as well, for the same reason, I
Yeah.
believe.
Yeah, chickens.
awesome.
You bought a dozen eggs recently, you'll know why they want chickens.
Yeah, that's right.
An anti-rooster ordinance, that's
Well,
what I'm-
that's my question. Yes, this property, if you look at it by itself, it's a large property and it's seemingly coming in, it's a rural field, but it backs up to 5
Yeah.
sub 5 houses in a subdivision. Now, I've lived in a house that was in a subdivision that backed up to a farm that had chickens and a rooster. And it was a very good thing that we were moving from that house. Because somebody's rooster was, it's not a good experience. And roosters don't crow at dawn. They crow at 3 o'clock in the flipping morning. So my concern is the residents that are directly impacted by this, and they had the coop positioned closer to our master bedroom, not their master bedroom. So these are my concerns, is yes, it makes sense from a perspective of the size of the lot, the location of the lot, except that it backs up to a residential area. And I don't have clarity that we have the ability to have them negotiate with, be good neighbors and talk with the neighbors and not have a rooster.
No, it's really whether you think R1 is appropriate, any use that's allowed in R1, we couldn't really restrict.
My issue is that
roosters
R1
on-
allows more than roosters.
What now?
It allows more than roosters and chickens. It allows livestock.
Yep, and we have a lot of,
Mules and pigs and anything else you would like to put there.
we have a lot of
So I know
R1
the
property.
present
that's-
owner may not have that intention, but at some point in time, once it becomes R1, it's agriculture.
That's true.
And it has the ability to have whatever farm animals you want there. And I counted 14 homes that have property lines that are, within 50 feet of their property line. So it's an issue for as Vice Mayor says, it's an issue for the residents as well.
Any other questions?
Yeah, you can, the owner's here,
The owner?
he's here. I will say that there's a lot of R1 properties in the town that are surrounded by subdivisions that, right now, they could have agricultural animals
Yeah,
on those properties.
That is true.
We're very developed out, so it's hard to avoid that, really.
I don't disagree. Yeah.
Good evening. Name is Michael Reyna, one of the owners for 630 Everett Road. Definitely not planning on getting mules, but I know I could say that, but that doesn't mean anything. I just wanted to say our neighbor, the plot that's the kind of square looking a little bit to the left, they're also R1. And I guess Mr. Shipley also mentioned a lot of lots in this size and around this area would be R1. So we just really want to have the freedom to have some domestic chickens, small number 5, no roosters at all. I do not want to be woken up
at 3 a.m. And really, it's not even anytime soon. It's more down the road when we retire. Might want to do some more gardening and planting, you know, vegetables and have a few chickens that are caged. And we have the area that's, as it kind of goes in this way, that's all wooded. So there's lots and lots of trees, and it's very sort of further away from any houses, and that's where it would be. So, yeah, yeah, I don't, again, of course I could say that, and then I could be a jerk and put a, but I could tell you, I could tell you I'm not going to do that, but I know you don't have to believe me.
It's not just you, it's
Right.
once you zone something for use.
It could be
you'll move
another
your-
owner.
And someone else will come in
Right.
and they could be the
Right.
jerk.
Right.
So,
Well, I
But,
submit to your decision, and
yeah.
that's the reason for the request.
but this exists throughout our town, where we have these R1 properties that back up to residential neighborhoods. So that's a point well taken.
And everything used to be a farm.
Yes.
A couple observations that R1 actually has greater setbacks than R2. Much to somebody from the city may not realize, you don't need a rooster to have eggs. I'll make that observation. And quite frankly, had the applicant not told us anything about chickens, that, hey, I just want to build a little, outbuilding in compliance with R1, and not said anything about chickens, we wouldn't even be having the discussion. We would have already had a motion and a second and voted on this and downzoned it to R1.
Amen.
So with that being said, I make a motion to approve the application at 630 Everett Road, 2.3 acres from R2 General Single Family Residential to R1 Rural Single Family Residential.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
And we didn't whine about it during the staff developer.
I had to get it out off my chest. You try living behind a rooster,
Well,
and you would all come
I don't
to
want
a
a rooster
public
anywhere
meeting
near
and
me.
complain about it.
I got a dog next door, it's religiously at between 4 and 5:30.
We'll all be over for scrambled eggs. Thank you.
Thank you.
But again, it may be 5 or 10 years from now.
Okay, we're gonna take a short break here for 5 minutes, and then we'll re-adjourn, we'll re-adjourn. Re-adjourn,
No.
yeah, re-adjourn. Do you need to leave? Oh. I thought you were getting ready to get up.
No, I'm not going anywhere.
I'm going to call the Planning Commission back to order, please. Item number 8 is a workshop item. There will be no action taken on this tonight. Discussion and public hearing on amendment options to the future land use map and the comprehensive land use plan update December 2012 related to a portion of parcel 069 tax map 142 currently designated as medium density residential and parcel 070 and 072 tax map 142 currently designated as medium residential.
Yeah, as the chairman said, this is just a workshop discussion. There's no action on this public hearing. This involves a review of the two areas that were part of the Boring Road, Smith Road, Kingston Pike study area that were not modified back in October of last year when a number of changes were made to the future land use map based on predominant community input that was received during the citizen engagement process that went on for several months related to this study area. These two areas are shown in brown there on the screen. The one in the north is between Baldwin Park subdivision and Waverly Court subdivision off of Boring Road. And then kind of southeast of that is an area that's south of Baldwin Park and north of an area that's a buffer zone, open space land use, and north of the Ingalls and the old Ingalls, which are commercial land uses. At the October meeting, when the future land use map amendments were proposed, these areas were shown to be changed to very low density residential, which is 2 to 4 dwelling units per acre. And the reason for that was really based on the predominant input that was received, and also that that land use would blend in with those existing developments in terms of density. When you look at Baldwin Park, it has a built density of roughly 2.37 dwelling units per acre, and Waverly Court, which is an attached single family, like a townhome type development, is a little over 4, like 4.3 units per acre. So that was kind of the logic behind that designation. But there was discussion, and really that future land use map actually is more than twice the density of what you could build, you develop the property under its current zoning. And we always talk about future land use map is not requirements, it's a guide. Zoning is what you can do with the property currently. Most of the property in these brown areas is currently zoned rural, single-family residential R1, which generally is going to be a developed density of less than 2 units per acre. So when this was discussed at October's workshop meeting, actually, there was discussion about the need to revisit these areas to look at the transition policy that's in our comprehensive land use plan, and evaluate whether very low density residential should be revisited to some degree to allow for better transitioning within these two properties. And that was supposed to be something that was going to be revisited at a subsequent or very soon Planning Commission meeting after the October meeting. But that was put on hold because there was a rezoning request that involved part of the lower tract that ultimately was denied at the Board of Mayor and Alderman level. And so now the staff is consistent with the direction that we were given back in October. We're bringing these areas back for your consideration and discussion. When I look at these areas in the surrounding context and the community feedback that we received during the workshop sessions, the area between, and these are just staff observations for discussion, the area between Baldwin Park and Waverly Court, it's about a little over 12 and a half acres. It may be a good candidate for like an open space cluster land use designation, to where potentially you could rezone that to something like open space mixed residential, like we did with the Grove down at Boyd Station, and mix in some attached and detached single family, and that would kind of blend in with those two abutting developments, and you could kind of transition that and lay it out so that it would, you know, blend in and be compatible with its context. The lower tract is roughly 20 acres. Those are not really based on property lines, but that one's a little different to me. You've got the commercial areas, kind of a higher intensity area to the south. And that one may be something that you you could potentially have some very low density up in the northern part with near Baldwin Park. But then maybe the southern part, if you're doing residential, which seemed to be the predominant land use that most people wanted to see in these areas, you could potentially look at low density residential in that area, and that's like a 3 to 6 dwelling units per acre. To mix in some townhomes or maybe some of those cottages that we looked at, the kind of the missing middle products that we don't have a whole lot of. We have quite a few townhomes, but that may be, you know, an option for that portion of this particular land use area. So those are just some things that, you know, observations that I had looking at these. Some of this may ultimately, we may want to have the ordinance revisited potentially if depending on the kind of direction and feedback we receive. But that's kind of how I see those areas, again, based on the surrounding context and the community input that we received at those numerous public workshops. So I don't know if anyone has any thoughts on that. I've got some people that have signed up to speak to this matter. Just have to let me know if you have any questions or thoughts, but we do need to, you know, talk about it, because this is the purpose of the workshop session, so that we can have some good feedback and direction to know what to do moving forward with these two areas.
Does anyone on the Planning Commission have any questions at this point? Mark, you want to call the,
I think we've been pretty consistent about listening to,
No, listen to the, okay.
yeah.
The first speaker signed up was Michael Wilson, and after Michael is Doug Horn.
Good evening, Michael Wilson, 412 Eisenhower Street, Farragut, Tennessee, 37934. Good evening, everybody. I'm glad this issue is back on the table for discussion. In the last time that we talked about this in October, I was stricken that we did these outreach meetings, but none of the data was really presented in this forum to the commission or to the public. And being a curious sort, I reached out and asked for that data, and I wanted to share some of that information just for a little context for this planning commission, because there's a lot of discussion about that process last time. So when you look at the area just north of the old the Ingalls building, the southern end of the bottom property there, that sub area was 55% of the people that responded to the survey in March last year said they would like to see that, you know, be in that R1, R2 kind of equivalent. Now, the term extensive citizen engagement caught my eye in the reading. So, I wanted to see what the number of people that participated. I participated in the second session of that march. And so I remember distinctly during that time asking kind of how many people were there the night before, and we thought there was probably about 125, 150 people between the two nights. The actual number is 58. So 58 people participated in March on this project for Boring Road, Kingston Pike. So 32 of them, that's the 55%, said they wanted this R1, R2 behind the Ingalls building there. I would give that local neighborhoods probably made up that 32. Interestingly enough, if you look at the other property, that property was subdivided into two areas on the chart. So when you looked at it in the meeting, C3, which is the Baldwin Park side of the upper piece of property, in that one on C3, 64% of the people that responded said they would like to see that being large lot individual homes greater than a half an acre, so 1 acre lots. On the other side, closer to Waverly Court, that number was 71% wanted to see half acre larger lots next to Waverly Court, which is really not very consistent with the land use plan. So I wanted to give a little bit of context about the numbers we're talking about as far as the citizens that provided feedback and input. Second, I wanted to talk a little bit about the transition policy, and Mark brought that up. Our transition policy, I know all of you are well aware, says that you transition from the higher density uses such as commercial back to the lower density residentials. In this case would be Baldwin Park and the properties to the north. That would be, feathering that across that property would be a great option to do. Mark kind of mentioned townhomes. So if you look at the low density, if you look at table 3.1 in the land use plan, low density lists 3 to 6 units per acre with the closest existing zoning district R4 or R5. That would be single family small lot homes similar to Baldwin Park, or R5, which would be duplexes. I don't know, I'm not a developer, but I don't know someone that would want to build duplexes at 3 units per acre. I would think it would at least be 4. But we also know that the land use plan says that normally when somebody brings in a rezoning request, you start out at the minimum density in the land use plan for that particular land use zoning area. So in this case, if it was low density, it would be 3 units per acre. And the developer has to provide some significant benefit to the town to go above that. So if we go low density, we're talking 3 units an acre behind the grocery store, feathering down to, I guess, about 2.5 units per acre along Baldwin Park, something like that to match the density, which would be very low density. So I don't know that townhomes, I don't know cottage homes, depending on the size of those, I don't know how well that would fit at 3 units per acre. So I have some concerns because we have this missing middle that Mark talked about. And I think that's a part of this discussion that needs to happen is how would we do that? Maybe what Mark mentioned for the other property up on the top where you have a mix of single family and maybe attached homes or these cottage style homes would be suitable. I'm not sure. I would go back to, if you remember year and a half, 2 years ago now maybe, Mark did a great presentation on this missing middle development type. I was in the room for that workshop. That was before one of the planning commission meetings. And we had some agreement between, the representatives that were here for Horn Properties and those that were here for Baldwin Park during that discussion of kind of maybe doing townhomes a little higher density on the border of that property with the stores, and then feather that back to small lot single family homes, something very similar to Baldwin Park. I would recommend that we pursue that, whatever that looks like for this property, and that before we really vote to change this, that we figure out what that plan would look like. I think that would be the appropriate piece. The property to the north, I think what Mark has recommended is probably a good fit there. And so with that, I thank you and have a good evening.
Thank you, Michael. Okay. The next speaker's Doug Horn, and after Doug is John Wright.
Thank you. Doug Horn, 12103 South Foxden. First, I want to thank the Planning Commission for approving our healthcare facility at the last meeting, the assisted living memory care. It was a 6-3 vote, and thank you very much for that approval. That's what we intend to continue to pursue next to the villages. We built a $500,000 road into the property, Village Commons Boulevard, and you all approved the assisted living memory care right beside the villages at the last meeting, and we continue to pursue that. So that's what we intend for that property. We won't build we're not going to build houses on this property beside an S1. We're continuing our efforts to get the S1. There is a need for assisted living memory care. I know John, my good friend John here, thinks that there is no need, but there is a need. There's a multi-million-dollar investment from Smith Packet, $69 million. They have a detailed analysis, and there is a need for more assisted living. More assisted living memory care provides competition for pricing. Those of you that have had an elderly person go in assisted living memory care, it's expensive, so you need competition to drive the prices down. So that's what we see. Our vision for the property is more assisted living memory care. Also, there was emails that went out that said that we were pushing high density residential, which completely false. It's a civic institutional memory care assisted living. They were certainly not high density residential. That was erroneous information, sort of like the Fox Dominion problem. There was a lot of false information went out to the officials here. But thank you for approving that. We built the $500,000 road into the property. We'd go in that road, turn right to another assisted living memory care. That's what we have in mind. The other point I want to make is at 2012, if you're talking about residential, we had 6 to 12 units per acre, and it was reduced without our input to 6 to 8 on all this property. So we don't see any reason to reduce it. There's more people coming to Farragut. There's more people want homes. There's more need for homes. There's no need to reduce the density. But like I said, we will not put houses behind the old Ingalls or the Ingalls. That's a bad use. They won't sell. We're not going to do that. We're going to put a memory care assisted living back there. That's our intention. We have movement in that area. Another point, when you own land, we've owned this land for 42 years, I think 40 or 42 years. When you own land, and no one knows this, you rely on densities for the value of the land. We've relied on the 6 to 8 units per acre for years, and more than that, 6 to 12 from 2012 to 2018. For the Planning Commission to reduce the land use plan, which does have a big impact on zoning, is really hurting us financially. So that's not a wise move for anyone to do, to cut down people's property value that's been at that higher level for many years. But again, in summary, we intend to put assisted living memory care beside the blue that's there now, the light blue. That's what we intend to do right beside it. Thank you.
Next I have John Wright, and after John is John Holtzreger.
Thank you. John Wright, 412 North Cedar Bluff Road, 37923. I work with Doug. I've been working on this project. I just sat here thinking in my head. At first I thought 2 years, then it was 3 years. I think it's close to 4 years I've been involved with this project. And we've looked at dozens and dozens of different possibilities for it. We've looked at single-family homes. We've looked at multifamily developments. We've looked at assisted living. It's interesting to note the uses we talked about a few minutes ago. It is zoned R1. So there's a lot of uses there that we've never even considered that maybe we might have to. I don't know. My question, and it's an honest one, even though I've been working on this for several years, it's never occurred to me, why is this being considered to change? Why does the land use plan need to be adjusted? What was wrong with it the first time we did it, the second time we did it? What's come up now? What's new about that area that's necessitating you guys considering a change?
I can tell you.
Please.
First off, Baldwin Park was designated inaccurately from the outset. When they adopted this plan, Baldwin Park was designated low-density residential, which is yellow, 3 to 6. It's not 3 to 6, it's 2.34 units per acre. Had they designated that accurately, there's no way you would have put medium density around it because the transitions wouldn't have worked. So you wouldn't have had medium density. Put that to the side. In 2012, the vision was that Old Ingalls was going to come down. It was falling apart. We thought that it would come down and they were going to do a mixed-use neighborhood. And so that would come down, you'd take out the buffer, you'd bring in some unique housing, and it would be a mixed-use neighborhood type development. Well, Old Ingalls decided they were going to rehab their building, which they did. So it stayed intact, the buffer stays intact. The property on the west side of, the east side of Boring Road and the north side of Boring Road, all of those properties have basically subdivided into estate-sized lots. When you drive down there, it's not, the area is not evolving as originally intended or thought of in the 2012 plan. The other thing is we adopted with this plan a policy. The policy states, a major update to the plans
Is this the 2018 update?
This is 2012, the 2012 plan, policy number 1, Policy number 2, the club should be updated as often as necessary to remain current. Even if no major changes occur, the plan should undergo a major review and update, if appropriate, at least once every 5 years. The plan was adopted in 2012. In 2017, we started the update. We did Watt Road first. We did McPhee Road second, or Snyder Road Outlet Drive.
Snyder didn't have a whole lot, but yeah, Snyder.
And then McPhee Road, we've updated all those, and this was the next one on the list. We had put together an ad hoc committee to work through, okay, what are we going to do? We're going to look at these different areas, corridors, and this was one of them that we looked at. We also, we were planning on updating the mixed-use town center. We're getting someone to come in. We're hiring a consultant to come help us with that. Because that's more complex. So there's many reasons why, and keeping this plan relevant and updated, a lot has happened since the original adoption of this plan. So that's why this was updated. The medium density, just from our transition policy alone, you should not have medium density right there against Baldwin Park on either side.
So, and not to be argumentative, I appreciate your explanation. So a mistake on how the designation of Baldwin Park has had us operating under the assumption that we had medium density recommendations for this property for 11 years now. And now all of a sudden it's coming to, oh, wait, we've got to go back and fix this. I understand the reasons why you're wanting to fix it, but it's a mistake that we didn't make has cost us years and untold amounts of money that we've spent on various plans for this. And I think some consideration needs to be made for that.
Also, a change that's made, Louise, is in 2016, we had the assisted living memory care that went in, Gary Keckley. Our main motivation, like I said, is to extend the assisted living memory care. We're still moving in that direction, right beside it.
I understood, and I hear you. I heard you.
And we're not building houses behind the Old Ingalls. That's not a good developer plan on our part. We don't think they would sell anyway. If it's 6 to 8, 2 to 4, it's not going to happen. We are anxious as a community. We're as much community citizens as anybody in this room. We've been here 60 years. I'm an old 63 graduate of Farragut High School. We've done our part in this community, and we do believe that there needs to be more competition for assisted living memory care pricing. Anybody that's got an aunt, uncle, father, grandparents wanting assisted living memory care, NHC's full, Villages is basically full, and there is a need. This company from Roanoke, Virginia, spent a lot of money on a needs analysis. We asked Scott Meyer to call when Bishop to talk about it. He hasn't called him yet, but we have proof that there's more need for this. And this is not high-density residential that some of the emails went out proposing that. That's totally false. Really, this density on residential, Louise, is irrelevant to me. We're not going to put, we're not, on that property right behind Engle, it's not a good developer plan, it's not a good real estate plan. I don't care what anybody thinks on their master plan, it's not going to happen. The property between Baldwin Park and Waverly Court, we built Waverly Court. When I was majority owner of Saddlebrook, we built Waverly Court. Now, we could see the Waverly Court density being on that property between Waverly and Baldwin. We could probably see that that's 3 to 6 per acre. But the property behind Ingles, never going to be residential.
Doug, I got a question for you while you're standing up there.
Yes, sir.
When you first bought this property years ago, what was all this zoned?
What was what?
What was all this property zoned when you bought this?
Well, it was in of course, Knox County. It was not in Farragut. Farragut was formed in 1980.
Understood.
The zoning is probably agricultural.
Okay.
It's agriculture.
And throughout your ownership of this property, it's ended up zoning the way it is, correct?
Yeah, we've not changed the zoning. We did try to do multifamily on it, which we accepted the fact that was rejected. Michael Wilson was against it. We sucked in our pride and we accepted that. Now we're after assisted living memory care.
But originally, when you took it from agriculture to whatever it's zoned now, you did that?
No, we didn't change the zoning. No, we never. The zoning
so it's still agriculture?
The zoning was put on by the town. We never asked for R1.
When we adopted our zoning map, it was RA. It was rezoned right before the town was founded.
Okay, so as you were a part owner of Saddlebrook,
we were majority owner.
Yeah.
We got out before the crash hit, thank God.
Understood. Yeah. A lot of people did.
Yeah.
But you rezoned both of those properties, right?
We did zoning on the Waverly Court.
Okay.
Yeah, which we have four units per acre.
Okay. What about the other?
What about which one?
You've got two. You developed both of these?
No, we developed Waverly Court.
Waverly Court.
And we did the Gary Keckley. We sold the land to.
No, I'm talking
Gary
about
Keckley.
Baldwin
That was
Park.
a different developer, different owner.
We didn't do Baldwin Park.
No, we didn't do both.
But you sold him the property?
No.
No, you didn't own the property though?
No, Mr. Stooksbury owned the property.
Okay.
We owned the property right beside it. We bid on that. That was after Bob Money had David Pfizer get involved. They outbid us $25,000. That's an interesting point you bring up, Mayor. If we had bought Baldwin Park, we would not have built any houses on it, and there wouldn't have been all this controversy about this property. But they outbid us $25,000 on that property.
Okay,
Mr.
the reason
Stooksbury
I'm
owned it.
asking is try to get some kind of a reasoning for what we've got, where this piece of property, or the various pieces of property are at now, and how it come about.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. We didn't develop anything.
Okay, well, you do? Okay,
Yeah.
well, I'd sure love to hear it.
So, in 1982, Mr. Horn rezoned the property that the old Ingalls came on. What they did was they rezoned some of this, it was commercial and residential, and he needed more commercial to add for the Ingalls. So they rezoned some of the R1 to commercial and some of the R1 to buffer one, the buffer, 95-foot buffer, and then the rest of it remained R1.
Okay, the town did this?
The town did this.
Okay.
This happened in 1982.
Okay, now who requested this?
Mr. Horn.
No,
Okay.
we did that. We
Okay.
brought a retailer in, sales tax revenue, good corporate citizen. We brought Ingalls in. And then they expanded, put the big store in.
They added on to the Ingalls.
Right.
So they rezoned, that was several different things, R1 to C1, R1 to B1, so that they.
To what?
R1 to C1 and R1 to B1.
Okay.
And then the rest was R1 behind it. And
That's
then
right.
in.
As it still is today.
As it is today. And in 1992, they rezoned what is now the new Ingalls, and I believe a theater went there.
That's correct. We built a theater. That's
So
correct.
that was, and it looks like it went from B1 to C1, B1 to O1. There was several on this one. R2 to B1, R1 to B1 and O1 to C1. So there was a lot to get that all, the office where the Farragut Press was office, but that's what they did. They built the buffer in with the intention that, that's what they did back then. They built that big, deep buffer, so the property behind it was intended to be residential, low-density residential, and that buffer was supposed to serve as protection between the commercial and the...
Well, may I say this? Mayor McGill, as I've said in meetings before, came to our office and said, Doug, you guys have been good citizens. You've done a lot of things for this community. What is your vision for this property? That's when we got 6 to 12 per acre. Mayor McGill, who was the mayor of the town of Farragut, and we got that approved. But we've never asked for zoning on the property, and we don't intend to, we will not build houses behind the old Ingles. That's a bad idea for real estate development. I just don't think that's a good idea. We're looking for the R1, the S1.
Understand,
Yeah,
Doug.
yeah. But we've never, Mayor, we never asked for any zoning change. And the R1 was given to us by the town when you all zoned everything.
But the development that you've done through the years is what's necessitated the zoning changes?
Yes, yes. The commercial we brought in with retail sales that we all need in Farragut. Yes, that's exactly right.
Okay, that's what I want to know.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm done with my comments unless anybody has any questions.
I have one more speaker, John.
Thanks for your time.
Holztrager.
Appreciate it.
Evening, everyone. John Holztrager, 345 Bernie Circle. I think Louise and Mark captured it pretty well. I mean, we followed public process. A lot of people turned out for the workshops. Mike commented on the numbers of people that were there expressing their desire for what this part of town should look like. And that's all public record. Pretty long history of what citizens won this area, and it's really been consistent that we've wanted single family. And I know that's not what Horn Property wants to build there. I like what Mike said. I like what Mark said about the possibility of doing something that is OSMR, in that area between us and Waverly Court, or something that approximates that. I think that might be workable. My own personal opinion, I can't speak for everybody in town, but I personally have not heard a lot of opposition to that idea. And then the area behind Baldwin Park, I like what Mike said about starting with zoning that is more like what we have in Baldwin Park, and then densifying further as you go towards Ingalls. I completely am sympathetic to what Mr. Horn is saying, that that's not what they want to do, but we're sitting on one side and Doug is sitting on the other. So my proposal that I've made several times before is for Horn Properties to bring forward a zoning compliant or maybe slightly more dense proposal as to what their vision is for those two areas. It'll probably be higher density than what we want in Baldwin Park, and it'll probably be lower density than what Horn Properties wants. But I'm open to some kind of compromise. I'm willing to organize citizens around that and work with Horn Properties to do that and see if we can't work out some kind of compromise.
That's all I had that signed up for this item.
Does anybody else on the planning commission have any questions or comments at this point?
I just want to make one comment. The last time, the reason this got waylaid the last time was because we just started having a conversation at the 11th hour. The residents have asked for this to be, all of that to be designated very low density residential. Staff has indicated that possibly the area in between Baldwin Park and Waverly Court be very low density residential, because when you drive in on Bourne Road, it is very rural feeling. It lends itself to more of an R1 OSMR type. The top part, I think Baldwin Park residents want to see that there's some protection right by their resident, where they are, and with a very low density residential designation, and then moving into low density designation, yellow. I understand that Mr. Horn doesn't see it this way, but we need to do something with this. We can't leave it in its current condition. It doesn't make any sense with the transition policies that we have in place. It is very well protected. it lends itself to the residential use that the neighbors have, the neighborhoods have asked for, the residents that came in and gave us input. And I would contend to you, that's kind of the input we get from a lot of our people, the people, we call them in, it's kind of like election. You can come vote, come on in, give us your input, and we'll work with it. And it seems to me reasonable to put what staff has suggested for now. And then I know Mr. Horn will continue to pursue what he wants. We approved a medium density designation, definition in 2018, and it limited the height to 2.5 stories. And it limited in character, even at medium density, it was seen to be cottage housing, single family attached or detached, single family detached in a, in a denser form. So even the current character of medium density doesn't meet the 3-story large building, large footprint building that was proposed.
Louise,
That's
let
my
me say, I would agree to try to work with John, the homeowners, on some residential density if we get the S1. We want the S1 beside the villages, but we would agree to work on the property between Baldwin Park and Waverly Court, and we've already had a down tick on the land use plan on the land on Boring Road to 2 to 4 per acre. But we would work with John on the property between Baldwin Park and Waverly Court. But if we get the S1, beside, on our road that we built, Boring Road needs to be widened, and we've been through all that before. We did build the road into the S1, and that's why we believe we should have another S1 right beside it. So if we can do that, we can work all this out with the property between Waverly Court and Baldwin Park. You've already down classified the land use plan on Boring Road. That's already gone to 2 to 4, so that's gone. The only one left is the one between Baldwin and Waverly, if we get the S1. If not, we have lost all the way around.
I'll say this to the rest of you. When you look at the Villages project, it has 100 senior adult living, 60 assisted living, and 30 nursing home. That's 190 units over 23.06 acres. That comes out to 6.9 units an acre. Now, I know we don't measure it by density, but it falls within the medium density that was designated when the plan was originally approved. So the residents have come in. We have a process that we've put in place to get resident input. We value public input on what we do, and that's what they've asked for. And this is kind of where we are. That's what I'm proposing. I'd like to hear feedback from all of you, because the residents need to understand where this body is before the next meeting.
I'll make a generic comment. It's not just, this is just points out an example of the potential issue in this whole process. You've defined the process in these sector meetings, what have you, and they're great. I'm not trying to put down sector meetings and the input that we've gotten. But there's also a downside. The downside is, in some respects, we're abdicating the planning function of this body to look at a bigger picture and defer to whatever one small voice of people want to dominate the conversation. And in this particular example, it's my understanding, I may be wrong, I'm open to correction, but there was never a lot of discussion or any discussion about S1 in that sector meeting, was there? I wasn't there. I can't say yay or nay.
I wasn't.
I don't think there was any, I have to stand back and look at this, not just what's, we're taking rights against me. I'm trying to look at what's, best for that section of the whole town or the whole town. That's the planning commission. I'm not willing to abdicate my whole thought process to whatever a popular vote was taken by some 55% or whatever percentage is of some folks. Input's great, but I can't let it just stop there. In the prior ones, we didn't have a lot of debate in the other sector meetings relative to what came to us from that. This one pointed out just the potential deadfall in the process of listening to that input alone. That's all I'm pointing out.
Well, this is not, what I'm proposing is not what we got from input. I'm looking at the designations, I'm looking at the transition, but I'm gonna point this out to you. When the town was founded, Concord Hills was not in the town of Farragut.
I know, we voted to become a part of
You
it.
wanted to become part of it because they wanted to put commercial down at the bottom of your hill.
They wanted to put a bread box at the entrance.
And you guys were upset about that, so you
Correct.
asked to be part of the town of Farragut. Why did you
Correct.
ask to be part of the town of Farragut?
So
Because
the-
the town of
so
Farragut
the clown-
listened to public input and did not put a commercial development
You're
there.
missing my whole point.
I'm not missing your whole point. This town was founded on, we were going to work through all of these things as a community. We weren't going to impose our own point of view on our plans that the
I
community
never said to
didn't
impose
support.
it. I said we need to recognize the input in the context of the whole and make our judgments on that, not just to blindly accept everything that comes to us that way.
We didn't.
I didn't say that we wouldn't.
But we didn't blindly accept what they said. We
You-
didn't
you're-
blindly accept it at McPhee Road. When McPhee Road, they said, well, we want you to leave that agricultural. You can't do that. That's not reasonable.
Well, I think you're missing
But
my
what
point.
they're asking
so.
for is not unreasonable in a land use planning. It's not as dense as the owner wants, but it's,
You're trying to make something specific. I'm trying to point out a generic, stand back and look
well,
at the
we've got
forest
to
and the
make a
trees.
decision on this.
Well, I'm not
I mean, it's
saying
discussion
anything
tonight.
about
But it is important to me that
We eventually have to make a decision.
eventually, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to, I'd like to eventually put this to rest. But I cannot see how 58 people are representative of the 25,000 people that live in this town. And much less it was 55 or 60%. And it also was apparent that they were not given all the different options that were available. They were given, the perfect scenario of a field with some rabbits jumping through it, and then some big estate lots, and that's easily what they chose. And back in October, I was upset because we were trying to force these 1 acre plus lots on properties just because that's what the 60% of the 58 people that showed up wanted. And I don't think that's representing the community's interest.
Well, the visual preferences that we used at the workshops were, we looked at the context and we tried to decide what was realistic and reasonable. We knew that there was no point in showing certain land uses in different locations because nobody would ever support it. I mean, so we tried to think about what kinds of housing, or we did have some institutional and office on the western part of that sub-area B, which is part of the western part of this lower area that's in brown. But the feedback that we received wasn't in support of, and that was just a one-story institutional building. So, I mean,
If they had presented a 3-story, basically that building is 3 apartment buildings put together. It's 65,000 square foot. The apartments at Biddle are somewhere between 16,000 and 20,000 square foot. If they had presented a 3-story, 65,000 square foot footprint building for a decision, do you think anyone in that room would have picked that and said, yeah, that's what I want there?
Well, they didn't have a vision of that. The community didn't have a vision of that.
It looks like an apartment building, and that's what they would have assumed it was.
Yeah, but, well, see, the village is just 3-story too, Louise.
I
The village is
understand
just
that.
3-story.
I
And it's,
understand
and it's
this.
rooms, it's healthcare rooms that we're talking about. Let me say this, why don't we go back and resubmit the zoning request, and we'll work with Baldwin Park on the property between Waverly Court and Baldwin Park, and the property north of where we put the S1. We put the whole thing back together again and work all this out. But they're
We can't do
room-
that.
They're
We've
healthcare
already-
rooms.
Limit that to 2.5 stories. That's what and that was the point that Alderman Burnett made. This is not a transition. It was going from a commercial building to a buffer to 3 stories down to residential. You have 3 stories here, but you also have a buffer of trees that protected this area. It
Well,
wasn't a
the Villages
transition
is
in.
three-story. The
wasn't a
Villages is
transition-
3 stories right beside Waverly
I
Court.
understand that, but
Yeah.
it wasn't a transition. It was the same thing. So basically what happens is when you put this same thing here, then the next request is next door. Well, it's right here, so now we can just extend it over. At some point, you gotta stop and look and say, okay, this is what the community came out and told us. No one complained about when we
That
had,
wa- that
we
wasn't
had
the
less
community.
interaction for McPhee, and we had less input from, this was the one that had the most input.
That's just a very few people that were inspired by our good friend John here. It was not the full community. Village Green, Fox Den, Kingsgate, they didn't show up. Concord Hills, no, they didn't.
Yeah, they did. You had,
There were 58 people from the entire community.
You had participation from several neighborhoods.
Way less than one, yeah.
In the November 21
A fraction of a
input.
percent.
Yeah, but like Michael Wilson said, you had 50% of 55 people.
We have a fraction of
You're-
a percent
And
decide
I want
our
to point, and I
elections
want to
every
point out again, all of the officials here at this room voted 6-3 to approve the assisted living memory care rooms. That's a good thing. Thank you very much, Planning Commission. And then it was turned down because we had false information, because it was high-density residential, which it was not, and we said there was no need for it, which there is. There is a need for it. You think somebody's going to invest $69 million in a development if there's no need for it? And there has to be competition for assisted living memory care rooms, because otherwise prices go out of sight and you can't put your mother and father in there. So I'm willing to compromise on the density on north of the S1 and between Baldwin Park and Waverly Court, but that's all that we should have to do.
Well, the board's already voted, and I'll need a ruling from Mr. Hale on when this can be brought back up again for your specific request.
Well, you could bring it back up, Mayor.
No, I can't.
Y'all can decide to bring it back up.
I need to know what
If
the
we
next
had
step
if we had a comprehensive zone of all the property, we could go in for all the property zoning, work with John between the two, and bring the whole thing back in.
Okay.
And
Bring
we-
what you want then, Doug.
Why don't we propose a full package for the whole property?
Bring what you want.
Okay, we will. Thank you. Let's do that. That's a good idea. That's a total different concept, Mayor.
Bring what you want, Doug.
Okay, we will. Thank you. We will.
Any other direction from planning commissioners on this, or anybody else have any?
That's the Baldwin Park Planning Commission.
Does anyone on the planning commission think it should stay medium density on the future land use plan?
Does what?
Does anyone on the planning commission think that it should stay, those two pieces of property should stay as they are?
I think
Right now.
the property between Baldwin Park and the old Ingalls
Land use plan.
should stay. I think that it would be appropriate to marry the density into Waverly Court a little bit better than it is. So, I mean, if there's an error on the plan that goes back to 2012, it has to do with the piece of property. I think it's 12 acres is what Mark said, that is up on Boring Road. I think that was incorrectly classified.
So basically then, it needs to be changed. And I think that's what Louise is asking for. What do we think it needs to be changed to? Because it can't stay like it is.
That's what I'm asking.
That one particular piece of property.
Both of them
Two of
have
them.
to be changed. You cannot have 2 to 4 units per acre and then go straight to 6 to 8 units per acre. That doesn't meet the transitions policy.
So to me, we're not talking about senior living and community input. Yeah, that's important, and that's how we do things. But if you throw out both of those two things, because of the mistake that was made, it can't stay like it is. So what's it going to change to?
I've made my suggestion. I think that the property in between Baldwin Park and
Waverly Court.
Waverly Court should be very low-density residential. I think the parcel between Baldwin Park and the buffer should be very low-density residential next to Baldwin Park and low-density residential going north to and that's a good place to start. Because we can amend the land use plan again, but it's got to make some sense here.
I disagree with those changes.
If I could maybe make a suggestion, because I get your point that you're making, perhaps if you take that 20 acres and you want to make it low-density residential, maybe you put a stipulation on that parcel that says, we're going to allow somewhere near the upper end of density on the part closest to the commercial, and we're going to feather that piece down to a density similar to Baldwin Park, next to Baldwin Park. The problem we have with this is the land use plan also says that you have to start at the lowest density for that area. So you're gonna, if you make all of that low density residential, then from the get-go, what you're telling Mr. Horn and Horn Properties is the parcels next to the grocery store need to be 3 units an acre, just the same as the parcel next to Baldwin Park needs to be 3 units per acre, because that's part of our plan. That's part of a comment that's made in there. So maybe it's you put some, make a change to the land use plan for this particular parcel and just say we're going to feather the density from 5 units an acre behind the grocery store down to 2.5 units an acre with an average units of acre of 4, 3.5.
But that's also kind of up to the developer to present the plan that shows those
Sure.
transitions. And as Mr. Horn's talked about multiple times, he wants to improve Boring Road, which would be significant.
Sure.
Benefit to the community.
I'm just trying to find a way to get a solution for that piece of property that people could get behind, because I agree with Mr. Horn. Here's what I do. If I was going to develop that property, I would put duplexes behind the grocery store. I wouldn't sell them. I would rent them, because I can get high dollar rent in Farragut. I know that's not what John wants to hear, but if it was me and I could get the high dollar rents that somebody in Farragut could get, that's something I would consider. Can I build two streets of duplexes, meet the requirements of this ordinance, but then turn around and rent them? That's going to tick him off. I used to live in that neighborhood. They're not going to like it, so I'm trying to find a solution that we can all agree.
The way you apply that transition is not exactly like that. You would start with the built density of an existing project, Baldwin Park, 2.37, and that density immediately adjacent to that would be at that low end.
Right, and that's what I'm saying. So feather from there out. Right.
Then
I just said it backwards, Mark. I said it the other direction.
Okay, yeah.
But
So
if you
it's
do 2.37, then don't you have to have that?
very low density.
Very low density.
You'd have
Right.
very low
That's
density
what
in
I'm
that
saying, very
area.
low density
I might point
and
out that
low
Mr. Horn's proposal that he brought before us had the S1 and then had a whole nother parcel of very low density between Baldwin Park and the S1. That was about 400 feet wide.
But we were very concerned that it wouldn't stay that density, and we would have more
That
S1
that is
behind
the
us.
definition of feathering is what he was
From
offering.
3 stories to 2.5, or one single family detached from a 3-story multifamily building to detached residential.
Well, I don't think that it was whether it was detached or attached. I don't think that was defined,
Well,
but
that's
there
what-
was feathering
that's
density
what-
that was proposed.
That's what the Baldwin Park residents would like to see, is that's what.
This
the-
Baldwin Park
that's-
resident, but I think the rest of them would agree.
I'm sorry, that's what the transitions policy would require.
And that's what he
area-
proposed.
Now you're moving from, but I'm looking at that, and it made no sense to me, how you possibly transition from very low density residential, single family detached, to what is basically an apartment building.
Okay, hang on.
What you're transitioning is you're transitioning from commercial to Baldwin Park. And so all of that has to be incorporated in the transitioning density. So,
Transition from commercial.
oh yeah, you got a B1 back there. You got a 95-foot B1. But it's commercial. You have lots of commercial that is sitting out there. And let me tell you what we're doing. I think we're debating a topic that we've already debated, specific to Mr. Horn's zoning. And what I would like to focus on is the land use plan tonight, because I really don't want to rehash this, and I don't think it's an appropriate time to rehash his specific, and I apologize for bringing it, because I was probably the one that brought it up with his application.
The original group that came in here to do the land use plan was from Boulder, Colorado. Is that the group?
That's right.
And I happened to have had a son that lived in Boulder, Colorado. And I saw a development that this company did out there. They had a connecting street of 2 major arterial street, had a connecting street, and on the street level was a 2-story building that had commercial. It was offices. They had, their office was there. I remember a psychologist office. there was a company that I think they did, they had maid service, and it was their office. It was offices like that. They faced the side street. Behind that was a two-story condos. There were two-story condos behind that group of buildings. There was a parking lot for the condos, and then there was and it kind of went in a two L shapes. Then there was in the middle of that property, there was a good size open space. And on the far side of that property, abutting a neighborhood of homes that were nice homes, they had townhouses they were houses, but they were on really small lots, but nice houses. And they abutted a neighborhood, which, and then on another end of that property, there was commercial again. And that commercial had small shops. It had an ice cream shop, it had a coffee shop, small shops like that. There was a small bakery maybe even. And that property was also on a major street. And so they did a very good job, I thought, of putting a very mixed use of needs on a piece of property that used to be the size of a drive-in movie theater. So if you know what a drive-in movie theater amount of property that is, I have no idea the acres. But that,
5 to 10 acres for a drive-in movie theater.
So they had a really nice development there with all these different elements put together. And I guess that's what I envisioned when we started talking about this property.
But it all evolved differently than what was the original vision. It didn't evolve that way.
But the land use plan is just in my mind, well, not in my mind, but a land use plan is a suggestion. It's not a zoning.
No, and I agree, but we have brought the public to give us input to make some decisions, and they've said they want it to be residential.
But the property owner doesn't, so.
But the property owner has been zoned residential since the founding of the town. This has been zoned very low density residential since the founding of this town. It was improperly designated medium density in 2012 because you improperly designated Baldwin Park.
So you think all of it should be redesignated very low residential, very low density
No,
residential?
I think the part south of Baldwin Park should reflect that we want the density to transition by having very low density residential right by Baldwin Park and the rest of it low density residential, yellow. So the light yellow and the bright yellow. That's what I'm supporting. I understand that this came about and you dumped a ton of, medium density went across the way, it went into, the low density went into between Village Green. There was so much density on this land use plan in this area that it was, I thought, when I looked at it the first time, I thought, really? That's what the community there supported?
So how do you?
They didn't.
How do you do 2 designations in one parcel?
We
Okay.
did it on
Okay.
the Swan property.
I think what she's proposing is a strip that kind of ties the very low density from Boring Road over to the Village Commons one, and then below that, south of that would be yellow, the low density 3 to 6. Then the area between the two subdivisions may be, I suggested open space cluster, because that would be
Okay.
potentially for a rezoning to the open space mixed residential. And it would give you more open space, but you also could have a plan of development that would tie the two existing developments together. You could have a mix of attached and detached with that.
It can be done well.
Why don't we give Mr. Horn?
As an example, I mean, we've got, that's about as mixed as you can get right there. I mean, it's got.
I mean, it's a much smaller tract, obviously, and there's only so much you can mix in with 12 and a half acres.
So then my feedback is that I would support that if it was presented at the next meeting, so that we don't have this meeting again in 4 months from now. Because we all agree that it can't stay like it is.
And I think we ought to give Mr.
How it
Horn the
should change.
opportunity. He says he's going to talk to John, he's going to talk to other residents. And he's heard from us. Let's see what he can come back with. Maybe he's got a solution that he can work out that we all agree with.
This needs to be on the next May calendar.
Well,
This is, we can't keep this.
We're going to tie it to the assisted living memory care that the planning commission approved before. We'll agree to make changes in the property that we got to tie.
Well, that requires by our zoning ordinance, you have to wait a year.
Well, we're going to propose the whole property. It's a whole different concept. It's a whole I think the town attorney would agree that would be okay.
Well, we just have to see what you're talking about. I mean, I can't answer that hypothetical, but
We're looking at other operators that may have two-story buildings as a consideration.
Well-
There's a lot of different things on the table.
we got to look at the zoning district. We don't need to get bogged down with the building or the height. It's the zoning district and what's allowed in that district. So S1 doesn't have a density cap, and it also
Right.
allows potentially for a much bigger scale building.
Doesn't have a height requirement or
It has a height requirement.
It does.
how
Yeah.
tall is, what's the restriction on that?
It depends on where the building is located. It could be 2.5 stories if it's within 100 feet of a property zone residential, and then potentially up to 3 stories
Okay.
past that.
Well, it seems like the issue with the planning commission here was the height, or one of the issues, was the height of the building was problematic. So I'm saying we're looking for other operators that may have a different size.
Well, I think unless you change the text to the S1 district to address scale, and that's maybe an option, then you have something in the district itself that would maybe deal with a concern that might be expressed dealing with a building that is out of scale with its surroundings. That would take a text amendment.
Why don't we do what Ron said? We'll submit a zoning proposal on all 50 acres. So we got 50 acres there. We'll turn in another zoning proposal. I'm sure the town attorney would say we could do that. 50 acres. It's not 10,
Yeah.
50. And then we'll work out something.
Yeah, but that's not the land use plan.
Louise, the other thing I want to say, Louise.
Let's get up to the.
If you really tallied the whole town, like somebody said earlier, you got 25,000 people. If you really did a survey of the whole town on something, then you really know what they think. When Stewksbury sold the land that I lost by 25,000, we didn't want anything on it. The next door neighbors didn't want anything on the Stewksbury land. Nothing.
Mr. Horn, I agree with you wholeheartedly.
But you got to look at the whole picture.
I get abused on social media all day long, every day, and I never get people in here to come to the meetings or we're trying to do a strategic plan update, and people send out false information about that. We need people involved. The more people we
Right.
have involved, the more reliable the information we have. But we can only I cannot go knock on everybody's door and say,
I
"Will
know.
you please come to this meeting, please?" I
I understand.
Town of Farragut does it right. We have, all the information is there. We have calendars, you can have agendas, you can look, we try to be active to let everybody know this is what's coming. And people are busy. They
Yep.
participate when it matters to them.
If it's not in their backyard, they don't want to really comment. That's true.
But our last election, how many people decided our last election? From local all the way up to the United States, how many people participated?
Very low percent.
You have to wait, that's what I have to work with.
Yeah, I
That's what I
understand.
have to work with. I try so hard to talk with residents and engage residents and say, hey, let you know, this is coming up. You guys need to be engaged. I know it's exhausting, and it's tedious. Nobody wants to sit through one of these meetings and listen to us go back and forth on the tedium of planning, but it's so important to the long-term well-being of our town.
I agree.
So I don't disagree with you, and I understand your point of view. As a property owner, I am in the position where I constantly have to balance planning, community, and property
I
owner
understand,
rights.
I understand.
It's
But
not an easy thing
And
to do.
it is good to let the property owner have input, like Ralph McGill did when we got the 6 to 12 units per acre. You know, it's good to ask the property owner that bought the property with sweat equity, you know, what their vision for the property is too. So that's valuable to do that too. Okay, well, thank you,
As
guys.
far as guidance for next month, what do you want me to do with this map?
Please put this on the, please.
We're still there.
Show open space cluster in the one area and then the very low and low on the other?
Yep, unless somebody has another
It can
suggestion.
be done.
And vote it up or down?
Okay, we're moving on to the next item, which is, are there any utilities? No utilities, and I think everybody who spoke for citizens' comments.
I understand. I'm tired.
I don't disagree. I mean, I went on record saying that.
I had this.
Meeting of, April 20th meeting of 2023 is adjourned.